Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Tavern Talks. Tonight, of course, the first three episodes of Tavern Talks, we're introducing everyone to our collective. There's three other people besides myself that are working with this project. And tonight, you get to meet our Twitch and YouTube producer and the guy behind everything, Otter. Say hello,
Hey,
Otter.
everyone.
Yeah. So we're going to be talking with Otter a little bit about his experience with D&D tonight, how he got into Dungeons and Dragons, what he's doing in Dungeons and Dragons. He also works with another channel on Twitch. We'll talk about that here in a little while as well. But again, just a quick thank you. We'll stop talking about it after today, but we do want to thank every one of all of our viewers and people who've supported us on our Discord and all of that. We did get affiliate within a week of streaming, so that was really awesome for all of us. And we're still getting everything set up, as I mentioned in our announcement stream a couple of weeks back, that everything is kind of evolving and changing. We're learning about some of the stuff about the different platforms and all of that. And we'll keep updating stuff as we go. For example, a good friend of ours, EB from EB Lounge, is here in our chat, and we haven't set up our shout out yet on the Twitch channel to shout out for other streamers that pop in. But thanks for joining. Thanks for everyone else that's in here with us as well. So Otter, let's go ahead and get down to business here. One more quick announcement. Next week, our Tavern Talk will be moving to 7 p.m. Eastern instead of 6 p.m. Dantichin and I have finished up our campaign that we were doing our homebrew game on Wednesdays. So we are going to be available to start running this at 7 p.m. Eastern starting next Wednesday. We'll have to get the graphic changed on our Twitch channel here, but we'll get that set up to show 7 p.m. On Wednesdays. All right, I think that's all, and I want to apologize in advance if my familiar starts crying. We did just feed her like seconds before we went live. And Cheese is downstairs, right, Otter? So you're good to go.
Oh yeah, Cheese is patiently waiting for his auto feeder to turn on, so he's out of the room for now.
Nice. All right, so let's go ahead and learn a little bit about Otter, everyone. So first, I know that you had mentioned you haven't had a chance to DM yet. Which is great and fine, because you're also fairly new to D&D, I believe, is what you had mentioned in our announcement stream, our little introductions there. So when did you begin playing D&D?
So I began playing in earnest about 2.5 years ago. My first experience with D&D was unfortunately not a very good one. I was invited to play a campaign with some friends from work at the time. And when we got together, it only lasted one session because the DM they had, who was running the game for us, was of the, how do I word this nicely? They were of the attitude of, I'm here to kill my players.
Ooh, okay.
And it was an abrasive experience across the board, so it kind of scared me off for a little bit. From there, I fell into hopping in a temporary seat with a friend who was running like a Star Wars kind of offshoot game. They needed a seat filled, so I hopped in for a couple episodes there. And then I fell face first into the lovely folks over at Dire Bear GM, and I got pulled into their Descent into Avernus game and have been playing since.
Very nice. So Descent to Avernus was kind of your actual introduction outside of the abrasive DM.
Yeah, I joined about halfway to 2/3 of the way through the campaign. They had a player leave and they needed another spot filled, so it was an interesting experience of, let me get you in contact with the DM, see if you guys jive. And I talked with them on I want to say it was like a Tuesday, and they were like, awesome, have a character ready for Thursday.
Okay.
So mild panic of never having done this before, but I winged it together and away we went.
Oh yeah, you've been really helpful helping me. If you're not, Otter's been helping me with the Twitch. Obviously, he's running the broadcast tonight. He also runs the broadcast for our Sunday evening live play games. of which we are going to be hopefully bringing EB in here in the next few episodes. We do have, as I mentioned before, our Sunday night games are going to be split into two parts, played over two Sundays, consecutive Sundays, as much as we can. And then, because each adventure is about 4 hours, and we, kind of draw them out a little bit to fill our time. So, to speak of that, that's actually a very good point when you talk about abrasive DMs. I've noticed in my decades of running Dungeons and Dragons, and I obviously went through those types of phases myself, where you do. There are dungeon masters out there, and perhaps it's the way that they're taught. I don't remember myself really being that adversarial to my players. I'm sure there was a time that I might have done that, but there are a lot of DMs that do pop in to where they think that it's a game of the dungeon master versus the PCs,
Hmm.
and they do end up going ahead and you know trying to doing their best to try to thwart the player characters at every opportunity or kill them off, which is never one of those things that I like for dungeon masters to do, just because the DM really has all the power. They have everything. They control everything in the game. They control the narrative of the game. And it's not one of those situations where when you play against the players like that, if you want to do something like that, go play Dead by Daylight or something. Um, what's your favorite? Like, let's talk about some stuff about D&D that you like. What's your favorite classes that you've played so far?
Right now, I can't really say I have a favorite class, as I haven't really been playing that long. I've been making a very conscious effort of every game I go into, trying out a new class, kind of seeing what each of them are about. So far, I have played a gunslinger, an artificer, a little bit of druid, um,
Your
and a
ranger
smidge
that you
of cleric, and I
yeah,
now can add ranger into that with the game on Sundays,
gotcha.
and
So that's
then
I actually have
wizard.
not. Oh, the wizard. Okay, I
Yeah.
have. What supplement is the gunslinger from that you played? I'm assuming that was a homebrew game.
That is from the Critical Role books,
Okay. The Tal'Dorei
and
book.
that character was in a homebrew class or
Okay.
homebrew campaign rather.
Okay. So, what's your favorite thing about being a player? Do you enjoy the combats more? Do you enjoy the puzzles? Do you enjoy the role playing, the exploration? I know a lot of players will say that they like a little bit of everything. But what is one of your favorite parts of being a player?
One, it kind of gets me out of my own headspace. It helps me to develop creative ways of interacting with scenarios and combat and interactions with NPCs. Kind of breaks me out of my shell, if you will.
Gotcha.
It's been fun.
Do you enjoy the puzzle aspect of it, or have you played many adventures with puzzles or anything like that in them?
I love a good puzzle. It depends on the type of puzzle as to whether or not I'm good at it, but I definitely enjoy my puzzles.
Gotcha. So what, like, of the games you've played in the short time you've been playing, what's tell us about your favorite campaign? Have you actually tell us first about your favorite campaign that you've played in?
Mm. I think my favorite campaign I've been a part of was over on Bricarius's channel. He's another friend of the folks over on Dire Bear.
Mhm.
He pulled me in for a horror, what was supposed to be a short series of episodes. It ended
Uh-huh.
up being a whole campaign that we're now working towards a part two of.
Oh, nice. Oh, was it
But
set in like a horror based? Was it from D&D, or was it from like a third party thing with Dungeons and Dragons, or was it just a homebrew?
it was a homebrew using a modified fifth edition. We added
Okay.
in a stress mechanic. So as
Mhm.
you interacted and saw awful things in this world, your stress score would go up, and the higher it went up, the more the DM could mess with you. You start
Yeah.
hearing voices, start seeing things at a certain threshold, you just have a heart attack, And I'm pretty sure by the end of it, we're starting a cult at the end of season 1. The entire thing was chaos, but I've never had a campaign stress me out so viscerally before.
Yeah, there's a third party supplement that uses the fourth, fifth edition D&D. It's called Mythos,
Hmm.
which has a lot of the Cthulhu mythos things set in a fantasy setting. I know that I've ran Curse of Strahd a few times, which obviously takes place in Ravenloft or Barovia, which is one of the domains of dread. Which, if you've got the Von Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, it's got all of those in there as well. But I ran for a long while at the virtual D&D weekends. I ran the DDAL, the Adventures League adventures, and they actually towards the end of those started adding in something called stress. There is, if DMs want to use something like that in their games, they do have a sanity score in fifth edition in the Dungeon Master's Guide. They talk about that a little bit. You can also use something called honor as
Hmm.
well for those types of things. But yeah, sanity, that sounds really awesome. Sort of stress,
And
I should really
speaking
awesome for
of
that.
the good old Cthulhu mythos,
Hmm.
in that same campaign, we were trying to get to the bottom of this mythical, like, jail. There were multiple levels we had to break through. We thought we were trying to help out a deity of good, going by the name of Entropy. By the end of it, we realized that Entropy was simply a champion of Yog Sothoth. So, inadvertently, we are now followers of the like, and ooh-wee, I don't know where season 2's gonna take us, but that was a ride.
Nice, nice. So, like in that campaign or any other campaign, do you remember like a really fun combat situation where the DM played the monsters really well, and you as a party? Because I always like to look back when I'm a player, when I do get to play, which is very
Hmm.
rarely. But I also, as a DM, I like to look back to see those moments where you have a group of players, they have their characters, they may have their backgrounds, they may know one another and such, but there's always that moment where everything kind of clicks for their party. Do you remember anything like that from any of your games?
For combat,
Well, not necessarily combat,
it's
something very, very similar, but like maybe just in the game itself where the characters kind of clicked.
yeah. With the horror campaign,
Hmm.
just because it's probably the most prominent in my head for things that stand out. We had a sequence where we were heading through tunnels and stumbled across a brown ooze. And when I say brown ooze, I mean catastrophically large amount of brown ooze. And the sequence of trying to get through this, it was one of the most stressful things I've ever gone through because it was skill check after skill check of, okay, you're already running out of materials and spells and everything else. You're only level 3 or 4 at the time. What are you using via what you have left, your resources, to get away? And it was
Gotcha.
just a progressive skill checks of us hauling down this tunnel, trying to get away from this mass of goo.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
then,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
alternatively, there was a protagonistic creature that we were dealing with, this three-eyed beast demon type aberration. And there was really not a lot of combat with it,
Hmm.
but the way he incorporated it into the game of this harrying creature that on the rare times we could take a rest, it wouldn't let us rest. It would attack in the middle of the night and harry us throughout the campaign. Inadvertently, it brought the entire party together and
Hmm.
helped really facilitate that teamwork because we had to deal with this thing that would appear, attack, and disappear.
Hmm. Yeah, that's something I'm looking forward to in the other adventures from the Keys from the Golden Vault is that whole concept of teamwork to
Hmm.
try to find those moments in the first couple of adventures. Obviously, we're going to have a few guests pop in as we get further in the campaign. but seeing those moments where the core group of adventurers that we're going to have in every week will be able to gel. And like the whole thing about they say at the very beginning of the hardcover is that it's all about teamwork,
Hmm.
which is really cool. It's going to be fun to explore that more in the games. Um, so
Yeah.
go ahead and tell us a little bit about what you do over with Dire Bear as well. Obviously, it's very similar to what you're doing here, but go ahead and tell us a little bit about the Dire Bear Adventuring Company.
Sure. I got pulled in over there a couple years back, and I started to throw my hat in the ring for helping out here and there, working on overlays. More recently, got into doing merch designs, helping out with Patreon we work, which we just released today. I'm really excited about that.
Nice.
So, a lot of similarities to what I'm doing over here.
And thanks, Cap, for letting us borrow him, letting
Yeah.
us join us. Uh, yeah,
The
because
whole reason
that's
I met Mitch in the first place is because Cap was like, "Hey, I know a guy who needs some help. Would you be willing to hop in a call and teach him some stuff about streaming?"
yeah, yeah. And then here we are today. Yes, if anyone's wondering, Otter did design these cool overlays. Did design the Tavern Talks logo up there and the backdrop we're running. We've got a little video back there with the flames that we picked up as well and put all these together. So he's been helping with the overlays and doing our YouTube uploads for us. Plus, of course, playing the Ranger Reginald in our Sunday evening games, the Heron Ranger. So what advice, since you're fairly new to D&D, what advice would you give a new player that's wanting to get in, that's either just started playing or wants to get into playing D&D?
Don't be afraid of the community. I have honestly yet to find a community in any aspect of all the D&D channels I follow, the Discords I'm in. If you're a new player, everyone is happy to help. I know people will tell you it's storytelling, or it's math disguised as storytelling. With all of the tools online these days, if the math is something you're worried about, a lot of the tools will help you with that and walk you through the process of, like, this is how these numbers are being rolled and how to add them all up. It's a lot more accessible than you think it is. Hop in and mess around.
Nice, nice. Yeah, the that's actually speaking about the math thing. I think since I started playing so young, I definitely could say that Dungeons and Dragons helped me with my being able to add numbers quickly,
Hmm.
just because of roles and being a DM, having to subtract from hit points from monsters, things like that. So it definitely helps with
And
math. Plus, you
especially
mentioned
fifth edition, you don't have to worry about THACO, so there's even less math.
that's true.
Thankfully,
That's
I
true.
never really had to deal with it, but I've heard a lot about THACO. But it's a lot of extra math you do not have to worry about in 5th edition.
Yeah, yeah. We had to have charts. You had to have all these different things to look up, and you had to keep your numbers in your head if you hit were able to hit a monster. But yeah, and plus, as you mentioned, if players are a little taken back because of the math, most of the time, if you play online, a lot of the pretty much all the VTTs do all the math and everything for you.
Hmm.
So you might have to sometimes remember to throw something in there. Okay, perfect. But yeah, so sorry, I lost my train of thought there.
No worries.
So what do you do outside of Dungeons and Dragons? Do you do anything else? Do you play like other video games? Do you play tabletop board games? Anything like that?
Um, at the moment, I'm currently working my way through the final stages of a certification in data analytics to hopefully
Okay.
branch into that in the near future. As far as other games, I'm a big fan of Tabletop Simulator on the PC. I love a good RPG or puzzle game. I play a bit of everything, to be honest.
Nice. I do myself love Tabletop Simulator. I've been in there a while, but I've got that. It's a
It's
real
a bit
great.
clunky, but it does what it's supposed to.
Yeah, when I first got it, I had planned on going back and making like a Dungeons and Dragons room and getting in there with my friends. And then I realized how intensive it was going to be to create that to have a virtual game.
Yes,
So
Wretched Cuts is in the chat. He is my puzzle game buddy. Anytime we find a good multiplayer puzzle game, him and I will beat our heads against the wall and get our way through it, which makes for some very interesting interactions as we are both two different flavors of colorblind.
gotcha. Okay.
So some of the colored puzzles we've come across in our travels have made for quite an entertaining couple hours of us trying to go, I see this one, but I see this one.
Mm-hmm. Actually, that's very interesting because I always think about making accommodations and such to make sure that everyone enjoys my games on VTTs, and I'm glad you brought that up because I hadn't considered that before. I'm going to be more mindful of making sure that the colors and things that you choose in the games are suitable for everyone. So that's a good
Yeah.
point. Thank you for mentioning
Definitely a
that.
good thing to ask your players. For me, it's yellow-green. I can see the
Mhm.
colors, but some of the shades blend together or are hard to see.
I see. Okay. So another question is, I know you had mentioned you haven't DM'd before.
Mhm.
Have you considered it, or what do you think would be something about being a dungeon master would interest you, or if
Um,
you're interested?
I honestly haven't put too much thought into it. I don't think my brain fires on cylinders fast enough to keep up with the chaos that is running a game for players.
Hmm.
It
Gotcha. Yeah, I think
might be
it is
something I
definitely.
could see myself looking into at some point, but right now, I feel like I do not know anywhere near enough to dip my toes into that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think I was fairly fortunate because I mean I was young, didn't have any clue what I was getting into, and most of the time when you first start playing, when you're really young, you're only playing with like one or two other people, so there's not much really going on. But then once you get up to a certain skill level, you start running more, and like I mean it's nothing to sit down to run for a table of eight now. So it's just one of those things that just come with experience, and if anyone's interested in starting to become a dungeon master, that's the best way to do it. Is just grab one or two, maybe three friends, and start. Pick up the player's handbook, and you can actually run basic games with the player's handbook. There's a few basic monsters and stuff in the back of it. You can also pick up the basic rules from the Wizard of the Coast website as well.
Mhm. I've got a couple like single page RPGs floating around in my repertoire here that I might consider throwing out there for some friends one of these days,
Mhm.
but
Yeah, and
that's a
getting
little bit
into it.
more chaotic than doing D&D.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, becoming a game master, whether it's a dungeon master or a game mastering other games, all of those skills go together once you start into D&D. As I mentioned to people all the time when they ask me about advice, the one thing I always say is just run games. You will learn as you play. There's nothing that a experienced dungeon master is going to be able to tell you in just one sitting that is going to make someone a phenomenal dungeon master just overnight. And it's all about just adding, like we always say, tools in your toolbox
Yeah.
that you can access later on.
With anything, it's building a skill set.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so, in the different campaigns that you've played, what campaign world has been your favorite so far?
Ooh, that's a hard one.
Hmm.
Again, coming back to the horror campaign, I love what he did with the world because honestly, we only interacted with the world for the first chunk of episodes, and then it was this multi-dimensional prison.
Hmm. Was
But
that was it a homebrew world, or was it a established world that was kind of made into the homebrew setting?
it was entirely homebrew.
Oh, okay, okay,
That one was called Domain of the Old Gods.
gotcha.
And then my second favorite would actually be the first game that I got to play with Cap as the DM over on Dire Bear. He ran a campaign called The Troubleshooters,
Hmm.
which was in like the 1920s Europe,
Hmm. Okay.
ravaged by magic and very homebrew world, heavily influenced by actual historical events.
Gotcha. What did you think of? Because you had mentioned you had joined in the middle of Descent into Avernus. What did you think of that setting? Being, adventuring your first, major D&D thing, and there's always the rumors back in, during the Satanic Panic that, oh, you're playing D&D and there's devils and demons, and one of your first sessions was devils and demons. What did you think of that?
It was a good time. I built an artificer armorer for that one, and they kind of ended up being like a pseudo Iron Man-esque artificer.
Mm-hmm.
But the way their story kind of played out is they were already in hell before the party had showed up.
Ooh, okay.
They were trying to research infernal metals. So their studies had brought them to hell.
Okay.
And it made for some interesting interactions with the NPCs and people of the area going like, well, why are you in Avernus? And it's like, for science.
Nice.
Why are you here?
So,
But
would you say that's your favorite character that you've played so far, or is something else that you played one of your favorite characters?
oh, my favorite character right now would probably have to be my wizard that I have. Their name is Orion. They are a porcelain warforged divination wizard.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
And the DM for this campaign was kind of iffy on the idea of warforged being in their world.
Which
It's
is
based
understandable.
off
Yeah.
of Greek mythology for their pantheon. So
Okay.
they proposed the challenge of, if you can give me a logical reason based on the world that your Warforged exists, I'll let you play it.
Hmm.
So
So, what did you come up with? Yeah.
Prometheus is credited from molding mankind from clay.
Hmm.
What if I was one of the failed attempts at that mold?
There you go.
So, made for some weird lore, I am as old as dirt, roughly. Um, so we built the Warforged from there, and I didn't want to do the usual glass cannon, I do all of the damage wizard. So they are
Mhm.
built entirely, like 98% built for utility and support. And I am having so much fun just messing with encounters and situations. I'm not really doing a lot of damage, but I'm helping the party do cool things, which is a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, that's a very good point too. Is a lot of newer players will come in and they're not sure what their roles are. But if a lot of I do notice that a lot of newer players also come in from games like what I call the Skyrim effect, where they come in and they want to be able to do everything because they've played Skyrim and they're the only character. They might have someone coming to help them or something like a henchman or something, but the majority of the time they rely on themselves, or they come in from an MMO and they do kind of get the idea of what roles are, like who the healer is, what a support player is, like you had mentioned, playing a wizard as a support. You don't have to play it as just pure DPS and pure damage. You can do lots of different things. I have a bard that I have for Adventurers League that literally has nothing but charm spells and spells to support the party, basically to control the battle, you were talking about supporting them, controlling the battlefield so that everyone else that does do the damage can focus where they need to. Yeah, so that's something to
And
remember for
it
players. Yeah.
honestly kind of challenges you as a player, because it's easy to pick all of the damaging spells, but when you get into doing support, you have to start juggling what things are concentration, what
Mhm.
things are charms, how many things can you juggle. It it's an interesting it's a puzzle of how can I help my party effectively without being stuck holding on to a spell.
Yep.
And at this point, I have given them three spells that do, well, three and a half spells that do damage. One is
What are those?
just the cantrip of Mind Sliver.
Okay.
Intelligence saves are great to throw at people, and that D4 has helped out a whole lot.
Oh yeah.
We have Phantasmal Force. It's not a lot of damage, it's more for the control effect, but it does do damage.
Mm-hmm.
Orion will die on the hill that this is not them doing physical damage, but there is summon greater demon in there. I'm not doing it. They
The
are.
demon is. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
And lastly, there's Dream, which there's the option to do damage.
mhm, nice. I'm kind of want to go back a little bit because kind of obviously my questions here had some stuff with DM, so I'm kind of improving some of these
Mm-hmm.
questions. But from this aspect, let's go back to the when you're talking about your first experience where the dungeon master was very adversarial. I'm assuming that's probably your worst D&D memory, right?
That is definitely my most abrasive one.
So, from a player perspective, in case there are dungeon masters that might watch this or watching now, might watch it later on when we upload it to YouTube or whatever, um, what would you say to, obviously, trying to be cool about it, but what would you say to help a dungeon master that plays that style from a player's perspective? Describe how that makes you feel when or how you feel when you're playing that type of game where the dungeon master is basically very abrasive and out to get the PCs. How did that make you feel, and what advice would you give
Yeah,
a DM that plays that
it
way?
it honestly sucks a lot of the fun out of the experience of being a player and interacting with the world when every time you come up with a creative way of interacting with a situation or a combat, and you happen to have roles that make it work, those kind of things should be celebrated a little bit and not immediately punished repeatedly for doing things outside of the box.
Hmm.
It honestly chased me away from D&D for a bit. I had fun building my character, doing all the prep stuff, and then it just felt like the rug got pulled out from under me and I didn't want to touch it for a while.
Gotcha.
So, if you're going to come to a table and purposely come in with the mindset of punishing your players, you're going to chase away good people who just want to have fun.
Hmm. Maybe if you're in that mindset that you want to do something like that, you probably shouldn't do it with D&D.
Yeah.
Just because we've talked about it on the channel before about when you play as a player and a DM, the number one thing most people should keep in mind is that it is a game and it's supposed to be fun.
Hmm.
And your fun, your personal fun, is more important than everyone else's fun. At least that's the way I look at it. That's the advice that I give people: is that everyone should be having the most amount of fun that everyone can have together, and not, put someone else's fun in jeopardy because you think that screwing people over or messing with people is fun to you.
Yep. And
So,
honestly, you could come at that from the side of the players as well,
mhm,
where it's not always the DM who can be the abrasive one at the table. Sometimes I have nothing against people who optimize their characters. I have nothing against people who just wing it when they build.
mhm,
But if you're coming to the table and the way you have established your character is abrasive to everyone else at the table, you're pulling that fun and enjoyment away from your party members.
mhm. Yeah, that's something I often talk about with when players ask me about stuff because they always want to bring, like running as much as I do, they always want to bring some sort of character that will be overpowering to the games. And I do have a player this weekend. I'm not obviously never going to call anyone out or to say it like that.
Hmm.
That does have a character. I mean, it is completely legal for the organized play, but it is extremely overpowered for the levels that the characters are playing. And I just simply said, "Hey, I got a question for you. I know you want to bring this character. I really love the concept of the character because I do." Pardon me. I was like, "How about we work on a few different things so that as we play these adventures, uh, you won't use certain abilities and stuff until we've played a few adventures, and then we'll, have you use some more abilities once those we get to through a couple, and then after we get through a couple more, we'll, bring the power level of your character up, and the player is completely fine with that.
Hmm.
Um, and I just as a DM, that's what I always say is talk to your players. Um, let your players, give them your concerns. The only thing that I always tell DMs is don't automatically say no until you've heard the player out, and then think about it, and then talk with the player about how do they think that might be overpowering, or something that, like you said, optimized characters. Do you think that would be something that would disrupt the play? And most of the time, the players are going to be like, oh yeah, I can kind of see that it's going to be a little bit more powerful. Now, of course, you're going to have the players that I love.
That's why they brought it up.
Yeah, that they somehow, some way, you still have players that think that you can win at Dungeons and Dragons, and they don't seem to get, the concept that yes, it is a game, but it is a storytelling game where it could go on, and there's no definitive thing where, hey, I've won Dungeons and Dragons. Yes, there are
Mhm.
things where your characters succeed in their quest, and the campaign ends as they've saved the world or something like that. That could be kind of a win condition, but the whole concept of that, if they are able to blow up everything, and have the most overpowered character, that's somehow winning
Mhm.
D&D. And
I
it's
actually
interesting.
intentionally kind of clipped my gunslinger a bit because
Mhm.
of combat.
Okay.
The gunslinger, it's a fun class. I enjoyed the heck out of it. But the weapons we were implementing for it, I was just pumping out so much damage. It felt to me, as the player, that I was taking away combat enjoyment from my party because I was just killing stuff.
Hmm.
So I purposely did some stupid stuff in the campaign and ended up with a warlock patron that I kind of got locked into, and started dumping levels into warlock to stop the fighting levels from advancing that damage.
Gotcha. So what rules did you use for the firearms? Did you use the ones out of the Dungeon Master's Guide, or were there, like, was it the Tal'Dorei supplement, or was it the Wild Mount supplement that you all used
It
for that?
was on D&D Beyond, the fighter subclass of gunslinger, and
Okay.
then the DM had found some period accurate firearms in the homebrew section of D&D Beyond that we were using for that game.
Yeah, that's something that's really interesting. If you're a DM doing homebrew, it's really important to look at and establish, like, look at a homebrew magic item or weapon or anything of that nature, and compare it to what is in the officially published books.
Yep.
Because obviously that stuff has been well play tested, especially the first tier one and tier two are the most play tested, mostly because most campaigns do kind of fizzle out around 10th, 11th, 12th level.
Hmm.
Pardon me. So that's one of the things I think they're doing with One D&D. What I've heard from some of the community on our Discord server is that they're trying to test it out to make, from what they've looked at from some of the different changes, is going to make things more viable at
Hmm.
higher levels, I guess. And as long as they look at the creature ratings, that's something that's going to be important as well.
Yeah. Overall,
But
the
yeah,
weapon themselves were not awful for damage. It was what? We were level 12, so the pistols I was using were 2d8 plus 6.
oh my goodness, they had the damage go up as you leveled.
I had access to better firearms as we went.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I guess that wouldn't be too horrible if you look at, your cantrips, because as the cantrip dice go up
Hmm.
for your cantrips, like firebolt, things of that nature. I guess you could kind of go along that way with a pistol shot.
Yep. Where it
Uh,
kind of started getting into the crazy damage was utilizing the features from the gunslinger and sharpshooter.
uh,
So
sure.
sharpshooter
Yeah,
already adds 10 to the damage with a -5 to the attack. It's got a +12 to hit as it is, so what's -5?
and you don't have the
But
short range.
and
Everything's long range for you.
yep. So there were points where you're swinging for 2d8 plus 16 twice, up to 4 times in a round. If everything's going well, it's just laying on damage. So I started to diversify the character to try and help out with the combat.
Okay. Check on chat here. Favorite character right now is a rogue monk with a high end, unoptimized for combat. Yeah, yeah, that's interesting too. I do. It's just depending on what the campaign is. When I talk to players about what they're going to make, some games, some campaigns are just brutal. Like, for example, one of my favorite when I first really got into doing the Adventurers League in fifth edition was right around the time towards the end of Storm King's Thunder when it came out, and then the Yawning Portal, and then Tomb of Annihilation. And Tomb of Annihilation is really a brutal, brutal hardcover. It was really fun to play with, but I always tell players, "Hey, play what you want to play," especially when they talk about, "Well, what's everyone playing so we can have a balanced party?" I always say, "Play whatever you want to play. I'll balance the game for you." Because the characters are the heroes. If you're going to punish them because they did not bring so that's like for example, if you go back and watch, those are that are watching, if you go back and watch our live play from Sunday, there was actually a situation where the characters are supposed to be persuasive to get information, and we did not have any persuasive characters in the group that were interested in talking. I mean, one of them, your character in particular, is an escaped convict. So you're not wanting to let yourselves be really noticed. So instead, I just adjusted that, and balanced it so that you guys could, your characters could use your perception to overhear types of things instead of trying to convince them to get them to talk. You just overheard them. So that's a way. That's what I always tell characters: is play what you want to play, whether it's optimized, unoptimized, and all that.
That's something I've had to fight with a little bit myself. Is my go-to thought bringing a character into a campaign is, what do we need?
Mm-hmm.
And
that's a good
breaking out of that is interesting, but usually how I start off is I'll ask the DM if there's something that for their story would help make things fit better together. Not so much what the party needs, but what the story needs.
Yeah, that's a really great way to do that, because for one, like you had mentioned right there, is that the players. It's something I always tell players as well, is that you're not there to just play your character. You're there to participate in the game. And part of participating in that game is trying to be as helpful as you can for the dungeon master. Now, I'm not talking about the rules lawyer that's always popping out rules. That's not helping the DM at all. But like doing that, where you're like, what can I do to play as a character? What class or what race that will help the campaign, or that will help you as the DM facilitate part of the story, which is really, really great.
And another great thing about that is when you're building a character for someone else's campaign, when you're working on your backstory, don't be afraid to work with your DM on things. Some of the things I like to do is I'll have story beats in the backstory that is stuff that has happened, it's there. And then I like to have a couple bullets in there of open-ended scenarios from the past of you have full access to do what you want with these things, to bring them up into the world, to kind of help bring some depth to a certain city or a certain interaction. It kind of helps you help each other.
Especially, that's really, really important in homebrew, to work with your DM about your backstory and such, because especially if you're doing a homebrew game, the DM is creating the adventure from scratch. Even adjusting an already published adventure, the DM can use that backstory. It's a little bit difficult. I mean, we try to manage it as much as possible in Adventurers League because of the portability. It's a little bit harder, but if you're playing with the same group for the same adventures for it, there's ways to throw in a few things from the background. one thing I do like to mention for players too, especially new players, obviously you being a little bit more mature, getting into the game, you're going to have a different perspective than younger people
Hmm.
getting into the game too. One thing that I always mention is keep in mind your backstory is just that, your backstory. That's what happened in the past. Uh, it can definitely facilitate what your character is now for role playing, but always be open to your character's growth as your
Hmm.
character goes through a campaign. If you're still role playing your character at 10th level the exact same way you did at first level, uh, that is totally fine. That is totally your call. But my advice would be is that I would think that you would try to look at the character's experiences as you've gone through the campaign, where they started off, where would their ideals and their, the flaws and their personality traits and stuff, how might those change from what they've gone through? Which I just think if players take a little bit of time to do that, it will actually get more enjoyment out of the game, not only for them, but for their party overall.
Yeah, you can watch your characters and your party develop around you versus
Hmm.
just having that same beat all the way across.
Yeah, and it makes campaigns like that so much fun to where playing the game is almost better than like reading a novel about the fantasy novel because you've actually played a part in telling
Hmm.
the story. Your character was one of the heroes in there. So sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes those campaigns can be really fun that way.
Yeah. And sometimes your DMs will throw you a bone when you start talking backstory beats back and forth with your DM to help it mesh with their world. For
Hmm.
instance, that wizard, the Warforged.
Hmm.
Because they happen to be old as dirt, they were around when the Titans were the ruling pantheon. It is
Right.
now the Olympians, but they threw me the bone of you can tell me anything you want during this campaign for lore on the Titans, and it will be considered canon from me. The
Gotcha.
world may not accept it because you're talking about things from the ye old past,
Mhm.
but as far as the world would be concerned, that is canon, which is a very interesting way to incorporate that character's age into the world, and I appreciate it.
Nice, nice. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and ask you one more question, and then we maybe see if the chat has any other questions for us. And I can hear my familiar starting to chirp a little bit there. But last question. We talked about like advice for new players and stuff like that.
Hmm.
What, in your experience as a newer player, what have you learned that a experienced veteran player might not think of? Maybe they've played so long that they don't think of certain things, but you picked up as a newer player. What one piece of advice or one piece of knowledge that you've learned as a player would you give to veteran players that they might not consider thinking about anymore, or something like that?
Oh, geez. That's a good question. Coming off of dabbling in Wizard,
Hmm.
I guess one of the best things I could say is really think about your spells. I mean, the wording is what it is, but there's a lot of creativity that you can glean from the wording of spells to use them in interesting ways other than by the book.
Okay. Actually, yeah, to add on to that too, because even veteran players forget this, um, especially when you're in initiative. Um, you need to pay attention all the time. If you're at a live game, don't. If you're just waiting on your turn and you're not paying attention to what's going on, it will slow the game down. Uh,
Try and prep your turn as the
yeah,
other turns are happening.
exactly. Start evolving what you wanted to do. Think about
Hmm.
uh, what's going on. I know it's a little bit more difficult for players when they play online as well, because if unless you're using a camera, if you're just using a chat and a VTT, it's easy to be tempted to step away when it's not your turn from the computer. But try to treat those types of games as if you are in person. playing with people at a table. You wouldn't just, in the middle of something, walk away and start playing on your phone. Well, some people do. Shouldn't do that. But keep that the flow of the game going to make the combat faster.
Honestly, some classes it is harder to prep ahead of the initiative for what you're going to do, like running a support wizard. What I can do spell-wise is entirely dependent for the most part on what my party's doing around me. So I may have something in my head that I want to do, but I can't really telegraph that to my party, so by the time it comes to my turn, the whole battlefield is shifted. So paying attention is definitely really important, because as a spellcaster, as someone who has to modify what they're doing to the party, you kind of have to be on top of things, otherwise it gets to your turn and you're like, hold on.
What happened to the guy I was getting ready to shoot? He got killed two initiatives earlier. The fighter took him down.
I feel your wretched cuts. I get so sucked into what everyone else is doing in combat and all the cool stuff they're doing that it gets to like a turn or two in front of me and it's like, oh boy, I got a plan.
And then it's gone.
Yep.
Yep.
It's crazy to think about. Each round of combat is 6 seconds. You'll have a hour or something long combat, but as far as D&D concerned, it was like 45 seconds. Sometimes a minute.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you, Otter, for joining us for the Tavern Talks tonight. Hope everyone had a chance to get to know you a little bit better. Is there anything you want to leave them with before? And thank you for, I know there's a few curveballs that were a little bit different, but I looked at my prepared questions. I realized that they were all, for players and dungeon masters, and the fact that you are bringing the new player perspective. And I apologize if any of those were too out of left field for you there.
No, it was a lot of good questions. Some of them I had to really think on, but no, even some of the DM stuff, I haven't really thought about it, but it's things to consider for the future.
Yeah. Is there anything you want to leave everybody with before we do our little, self-promotion about upcoming streams?
Well, if you're thinking about getting into D&D, find yourself a good community and dive in, start asking questions. Everyone's here to help, and everyone's really lovely. It's worth coming in and saying hi.
And as I mentioned before, if you haven't joined our Discord, obviously the Discord link is popping up in the chat there. Also, if you access the About Us below, you can click on the Discord panel there. That will lead you over to our Discord community server. I do have 2 different servers. One's a private server for my client games. One is for our community, and I'm slowly getting everyone that's on our the private server migrated over to the community server. And I must say, it is a really great community. Everyone on there, like Letitia is here in our chat. She's one of our community members on the private server, and hopefully I think she moved over to the new one. But they're all really helpful about discussing character builds, talking about stuff, especially for new players if they're new, about helping out everyone is really, really helpful with regards to that. And my throat is getting a little dry here. My apologies.
Yeah, I've even had communities like overseas for D&D. I've got some great people I talk to out in the Netherlands. Any of them, even for like streaming stuff, you just pop in and start chatting, ask questions. Everyone's more than happy to just sit down and talk with you.
Oh yeah, it's a great community for Dungeons and Dragons. All right. Well, thank you all for tuning in tomorrow. Don't forget, next week, next Wednesday, we'll be talking with Dantishin, the other member of our collective. That will be at 7 p.m. Eastern. We will get that changed on our schedule cards on our Twitch channel here. We'll get those changed in the Discords as well, and we'll change it in our schedule below. Tomorrow, starting at 1 p.m. Eastern, I will be back on for Dungeon Delving. I'll be continuing the characters that we made for Baldur's Gate Enhanced Edition for tomorrow. And And there's also in this a role in the community server for stream discussion. If there's different D&D types of games, if I've got them in there, or if I don't have them, they're not too expensive, I might give those games a try as well. If there'd be something more interested in people watching and talking about Dungeons and Dragons, we try to do Thursdays a turn-based game. That way, if there's a discussion in chat, we can pause the game and chat a little bit like that. And then on Friday, we do have Around the Campfire, which is again at 1 p.m. Eastern, which we're doing Lord of the Rings online on the Landreval server. That way, if anyone that's in the community wants to join in the server for Lord of the Rings online on the Landreval server and play, they can do so as well. A reminder, it is a free-to-play game. If you want to pay money, you can get extra stuff, but there is an in-game currency that you can gain as you level and complete deeds and quests. That you can also spend to open other parts of the game. And with that, I think that's pretty much all we have for today. Unless you have anything else to add, Otter?
No, I think I'm all set. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on, and thank you for the new subs. We're still, as I mentioned, I'm still getting used to making sure to check the chat as we're streaming. But again, it's just it's going to take a little bit of just like I said. Play more games to learn how to be a better DM. I'll have to, just do more streams to become a better streamer. All right. Well, thanks for everyone that joined in and watched this evening. Everyone have a great rest of your evening and have a great rest of the week. And we will talk to you tomorrow. Happy adventuring, everyone.